Welcome. I'm Stephen Garvey. I'm with Brian Barbour here, and we're going to talk about some critical issues that we're facing here in Canada, the US, Europe, literally worldwide. It's crazy what's going on, Brian. Very happy to have you here. To me, you represent a beacon of sanity, of rationality, of common sense. So I'm really looking forward to this. We did do a dialogue with Brian a couple of months ago, but the audio was not great. So, but this will be very clear audio today. Brian has international private finance background. He's got extensive experience in Ukraine, Russia, and most importantly, on the ground, interacting with Russians, with Ukrainians. So we're going to bring that into this dialogue. But mistake not, there is a crisis going on. It's unbelievable, everyone. We're confident you're following it, but we're going to unpack it all today. Your comments will stream in, so we will get to them as we can. But welcome, Brian, on this critical juncture in not only Canada's history but the world's.
Well, thanks for having me, Stephen. And like I say, we had an initial dialogue at a Russian party that was, celebrating the end of World War II. It was just pretty horrendous experience for Russians. Almost every Russian was affected by that, with 26 million people dead. And incidentally, at the party was probably 50-50 Russians and Ukrainians. And I'm married to a Russian lady, and have been for 20 years. So I've been going to Russia and surrounding area for 20 years now, which includes Ukraine, a little bit of Ukraine. It includes going down to into the Donbass area 5-6 years ago. And I don't just go to these places. I managed to annoy my wife by like interviewing people and asking them questions, because unless you're there to learn something, that is a vacation for me, is going to a place or a culture and talking to the actual street level people and learning about them, what their day-to-day life is, and what their human condition is. And so I find that far more entertaining for me, and it's informative as well. So I also live part-time in Russia. Have a cottage there. I have places there. And so I've gotten to know, I'm not a Russian insider. I'm not an insider in politics or anything like that, but I do know the Russian people at street level. I do know the Crimean people at street level. I've asked them lots of questions. So I'm just a curious guy. And, one of my hobbies is really to establish in my own mind what the difference is between what we're told and what the truth is. The truth is over there, and it's actually inside, locked inside the people. Not always locked up, but so you go over there and find out for yourself. And then what you have is the truth, and you can compare that at all times to what's being told to you on the media about Crimea and other areas like that. So I find that to be amazingly interesting. And it's better to be informed than uninformed. And quite frankly, there's so many people talking and expounding on these areas, whether it's Russia, Crimea, or Ukraine, and they've never been, and they don't know anything about the places other than what they've seen on CNN and CBC and all that stuff. So I'm not in that group. I go get my own. I formulate my own take on places, and so I'm kind of proud of that, because it serves me well in this really tumultuous time that we're going through right now. This is difficult. I have never ever seen anything like this in my life, where, and especially what's happening in Europe. Once the invasion started, let me just say, today when you talk about a country invading a sovereign piece of territory for whatever, that's a pretty serious thing. And it's taken very seriously. And one of the things I'd like to discuss today is not the war or any aspect or minutia of the war itself. I'd like to really focus on the month to 2 months leading up to the invasion, because that's really important. People tend to forget. My position, and it will always be my position, that I am a peace lover. And when I say that, to be more explicit and break it down, I view diplomacy, intensifying diplomacy over military and any type of violence that would occur in these areas. I believe in diplomacy, and diplomacy will diffuse any situation if the two parties involved are honest and open and transparent and really wish to arrive at an agreement, basically that that essentially deletes war as an alternative military action. This particular thing could have been diffused so easily. It's unbelievable. And all you have to do is go back to the Minsk Accord. The Minsk Accord was a simple document that said, hey, stop, those people that are attacking the Donbass. And to give it a little bit of a Canadian perspective, this is important for people, that those weren't government sanctioned military people in the Donbass. So if you can imagine in Canada, let's say Hells Angels and 5 other motorcycle groups got together and they were funded by North Korea and armed by North Korea, and they decided that, oh, French Canadian people are not part of Canada and we need to start attacking them in Quebec and Northern Ontario. And so they get these things, they start, firing mortars and doing things and shooting them, which was done to the tune of somewhere between around 12 to 13,000 people in the Donbass. They start shooting them on the basis of we are the ultimate race of people, and anyone who is not us, for example, French Canadians, just as an example, we're going to attack and we're going to shell, maybe parts of Montreal, the townships, go to these places and shell them and make life miserable for them because we want them to go back to France where they came from. Now, that is exactly, first of all, they were here at the same time or before the English-speaking people. Secondly, so were the people in the Donbass. That was Russia. That was Russia as far back as 1750. They didn't interlope into what was traditionally called the Ukraine. They were always there. They've been there as long as the Ukrainian in the Donbass eastern region there. And so these guys decide that they're the enemy and they're going to, conduct military operations down there. And, it's not a full-scale kinetic war, but what it is it's a dug-in, entrenched launching for, mortars, rockets, you name it. It goes into these cities like Lugansk, and it lands wherever, and people get killed. And it's as simple as that. And they've been doing that since 2014.
Yep.
The reason why those people were so afraid down there is because in Odessa, they cornered 150 of them in a building and lit it on fire, trying to kill them all. These people are obsessed with their ideology, which is a supremacy-based thing surrounding being pure blood Ukrainian. I've seen that before. It's dangerous, and so they didn't just wake up one morning and get afraid. Secondly, again, these militias that came in after that fact are not part of the military. They're not part. In fact, I've seen them beating up the police departments in the Luhansk area on video, and it's still on video. These guys are just trying to keep the peace while these guys are mortaring, the towns. So, it's it's a crazy situation. And had we been back a whole bunch of years when we used to have a guy in charge of Canada named Lester B. Pearson, what Lester B. Pearson would have spearheaded, along with the UN, would have been to have blue helmeted Canadian peacekeeping soldiers line up along the entirety of that attack line, because the Ukrainian guys were dug in, and have them shut it down. And there would have been peace there. It might have been, a little contentious, but there would have been peace there. But today we don't have those guys anymore. The Lester B. Pearson type guys who try for peace, and even the UN, they don't do that. And so, getting back to the leading up position of war, there were many off ramps to a military, thing building up, and it could have been done by anybody. But the Ukrainians and Zelensky, well, not at that time, not Zelensky, but leading up to war was Zelensky, but there was no will to engage in any diplomacy whatsoever. Lavrov, who's one of the most skilled negotiator, and I think he's the most skilled diplomat, quite frankly, in the entire world, tried everything. A starting point was just to adhere to the Minsk agreements, which they'd already signed. They would not do that. Okay, they wanted to keep shelling and bombing and killing Russians, and so the failings were all on the Ukrainian side. I'd like to also add here that Zelensky, when he got in, and all these guys going back 2 or 3 years, they're all corrupt and crooked. It's the most corrupt nation pretty much on earth. But Zelensky ran on a ticket. You have to remember this. His main plank that he ran on was to create peace in the Donbass. Because you got to remember, in Odessa, even in Kiev, there's lots of Russians there. They don't want to see their relatives getting shelled every 5 minutes. So it's fairly simple math. Stop the war. Stop this militia-based thing. And so Zelensky goes down there, and he tried to get these guys to stand down. Well, they looked at Zelensky like he was a comedian or something. I don't know, but they weren't going to do anything he says, because Zelensky has absolutely no control over these guys. Again, they're not part of the government. They're not part of the army. They're a bunch of motorcycle gang and football hooligans who got together as supremacists and started doing, what they were doing. So they just laughed at him. Now, Zelensky is then stuck between a rock and a hard place, because these guys have infiltrated all levels of government, and his life's in danger. He'd be killed in 5 seconds if he starts doing the wrong things that are contrary to the ideology of these supremacists. So, he's in a tough situation. But I'm just going to say, the Russians and Lavrov did every single thing they could to try and avoid this military action.
Of course.
And the other thing is the NATO and the other guys coached Zelensky. Let's get this thing going. So they stacked 80,000 troops up in Donbass, because they were going to do a full forward kinetic launch into the Donbass, and that was what broke the decision wide open for Russia to invade, because their people were going to be killed.
Yeah, 100%. I'm totally convinced of that. But we're welcome to other perspectives here today. But the bottom line is that NATO's been encroaching for decades on Russia's borders. They keep adding more and more NATO countries, and most recently Finland and Sweden. Since 2014, Canadian military operatives, US military operatives, likely European, have been training, funding, arming Ukrainian military and neo-Nazi elements. This is factual information, Brian.
Well,
bottom line is, since then, as Brian said, I would say that I've heard numbers of 14,000 people in Donbass.
Yeah.
And I'd like to point out to everyone, it's happening right now. because they can't fight Russia on the battlefield. They're bombing Donbass, Donetsk, the capital of Donbass. They're literally shelling innocent civilians now. Okay? But as far as I'm concerned, Russia could see what you said, Brian, that if they didn't go in there, there would have been a massive assault on the Donbass
Well,
region.
it was a genocidal. It's a
Yes.
genocidal action
And then
based on their
Russia
ideology.
Russia would have been in a huge mess trying to clean that up, right?
Yeah.
Because they
Well,
would have been behind. So they
right.
preempted it, everyone. And Russia has the right to defend its national security and its sovereignty. People need to recognize that. This isn't mainstream narrative. And I just want to get to a comment. Wayness, Brian and I are 100% agree with you. I wouldn't call this a war yet. I call it, well, economic war, Brian. There's also a propaganda war, but the military, it's a special operation of Russia.
Well,
It hasn't gone into a full scale war yet. It's a proxy war, right? Vis-a-vis US, EU, NATO on Russia.
well, they all want to take down Russia, and so
Yeah.
you know, you could sit there and say, well, why would they want to take down Russia? You know, and you know, even to micromanage and analyze a simple relationship, which is the one between Russia and Germany. All Russia has done so far in the past 25, 30 years with Germany is supply them with cheap gas so they could build an industrial megalith. They are the hottest industrial economy. They're really just about the only economy in Russia. I mean, France is pretty big too, but Germany is an unbelievable powerhouse when it comes to manufacturing.
Yeah.
And you know, you can see all the names that not only in cars but in appliances and everything else. So you know, what did Russia try to do to Germany to influence them policy wise? Absolutely nothing. Zero. It was strictly a commercial relationship, as it was with anyone else accepting gas. But if you want to know why they hate Russia, when Putin got in, like him or love him, and I've got points about Putin that I don't like, but like him or love him, the guy went to work for the people of Russia. And you got to remember, in the 90s, Russia was bankrupt. They had no foreign reserves. They had nothing. They were as bankrupt as you can get, like Sri Lanka is today. Except the thing is, Putin's a strategist. And he goes, well, what do we got to work with? Well, we've got resources, lots of them. We've got gold. We've got all kinds of strategic metals. We've got the biggest gas reserves in the entire world and some pretty good oil reserves too. Oh, well, let's get busy. And let's not be losers any longer. Let's be winners. And he did exactly that. So in the month before this invasion, really the country had 670 billion in foreign reserves. In fact, if you take the foreign, and these are basically savings, which are net profits from exports. They're the money you receive subtracted by the money that you pay out for imports. And they had built up, they've got such a huge balance of trade surplus that they'd accrued 660 billion in foreign reserves. In fact, if you divide that by 140 million people in Russia, they've got some of the highest per capita reserves in the world, higher than China. So, in terms of going from a total loser with no foreign reserves and a totally bankrupt nation, which, I've been going to since the early days too, and it was not a very finished place to go to. It's very backwards. The place was dilapidated. Now today, it's the most renovated. Moscow, Kazan, Sochi is expanded by 20 times, and it's the most up-to-date place in the entire world, including the areas north where you go skiing and all the way up. This is a real nice place compared to what it used to be. So is Moscow. You didn't have to get too far out of Red Square to enter some areas that weren't very nice. man, this stuff is finished like any major city in Europe, and he's also saved up money. But not only are they hate him for what he is, which is a guy that's got tons of money and no debt. So he doesn't have 30 trillion in debt, or on a per capita basis against the US, he doesn't have 14 trillion in outside external debt. He's got zero. He's pretty much zero. In the G20, he's got the lowest debt to GDP ratio in the G20. He's a winner. They hate that. They hate it. It's envy. Secondly, he was going to become more and more of a winner. And I'm going to tell you how. Right now, they have one fairly substantial gas line into China. He was going to build, there was going to be gas line 2 and gas line 3. And gas is a blue chip business. It spins cash like you wouldn't believe 24 hours a day. Secondly, it doesn't have the political will against it like oil does, and burning oil and gasoline and diesel. So he's got the biggest reserves in the world. And secondly, via shipping, oil and gas products into China, he was going to make China even stronger. And they've been pushing Putin away and telling him to get lost for 20 years now, and he's just gotten close to China. There's nothing else to do strategically, so he's quite aligned with China. That's the fault of the U.S. They just pushed him off and said, go sit at the back of the bus. We're in charge. And Putin's not that guy. And in fact, if you took the G20, he's the smartest politician of all of them. He's the only guy that acts on behalf of his people to the betterment of his people. The rest of these guys, I don't know what they're doing. And this includes everybody.
Yes.
They are not acting in the best interests of any of their people whatsoever. It's like they've got a private club of chess, geopolitical chess masters, and they'll will 10 or 20,000 people to die on a battlefield, and they just don't care. They're just part of the fodder that feeds into the war mill. I don't look at things that way. I think life is sacrosanct, and people, wanting to live a good life is in every country. I think that's a fairly important political objective for just about any country. So, the people right now that rejected any kind of diplomatic solution down there, NATO, the US, they're all part of the same group. They wanted the war, and they want it desperately. And their early plan, their early blueprint was to come in. And by the way, this asymmetric war is the most stunningly coordinated economic gang rape of Russia that I've ever seen in any country. For example, today, Turkey is invading Syria. Today, that's a foreign country. Do you see anything in the news? The United States does it all the time. If you want to go back on who wrote the playbook of invading sovereign countries, I can't think of anyone better than the United States of America. They do it weekly. They're doing it weekly. But when somebody else does it, it's not such an efficacious kind of thing. And then the other thing is the psychological warfare. These people have been doing it for years. They've got tens of thousands of people that do psychological warfare, which is both giving you bad information and also deleting information you need to have to be intelligent. 80% of it is through the omission side. But they also give you messages on how to make you think that Putin is the next Hitler, and that all these other guys in Germany, France, they're Winston. They all want to be Winston Churchill, so they'll have their place in history as Winston Churchill. And this narrative is very carefully crafted by all these people. It's just not true. And like I say, the United States in Libya, in the Balkans, carpet bombing the places. Oh, we're dropping freedom and democracy from 30,000 feet. And, again, the world is dividing right now because the world's had enough. Thanks to really good people on the internet who actually report the truth, people don't watch TV any longer. And even though Trudeau is doing Bill C-11 and other things to make sure you never watch any of these sources on the internet. They're the truthful guys because they're not owned by anyone. And the CBC and all these guys are getting money, and they'll say anything asked of them because they're owned. And it's really, really discouraging. But I am an anti-war guy, and I am a pro doing democracy or doing diplomacy until you just can't stand up any longer. And this was not done in this case because the only side doing diplomacy was Russia, and they were rejected and rejected and rejected. And even today, oh, sure, we can arrive at a peace deal as long as you get out of Ukraine and get out of the Donbass so we can go back to killing people. We'll end the war. And that ship has sailed. I mean, once you you woke up the dragon, which is the Russian military, and you caused them to sacrifice their good Russians down there, and there's lots of them dying, sacrifice these people for this cause, which is security on their own borders. The end result is the conclusion of this thing is going to be that, the Ukraine will be split up into different sections. And there's no way around that. And there is no way it's not going to happen. It's really just making the new lines right now. And Crimea is never going back. And I see some of these bozos on CNN going, well, if we ship enough weapons and rockets, maybe we can get the Crimea. And they all talk about we. In other words, it's not maybe they can get the Crimea back, being the Ukrainians. It's we. So it's all their war. That's when they start saying we. They've owned the war. It's a proxy war. And again, so they want to destabilize Russia. Sorry to jump around here, but they want to destabilize Russia because Russia's being unbelievably successful. They don't have the debt. They have lots and lots of cash. Oh, and the other thing that Putin did, which will get you killed all the time, he de-dollarized. So that's a death sentence. That was a death sentence for the guy in Libya, Gaddafi. It's a death sentence for Saddam Hussein. And again, not a nice guy, but we don't have the right to go in and kill these guys just because we don't like them. That's up to their people to do those things. So Putin de-dollarized, so he's got to die. He must be killed or taken out of power. And, the United States runs the government in Ukraine and has since 2014. They dictate who is minister of this, who is minister of that, who runs the place. They dictate everything.
Yeah.
And I think this guy Zelensky, one tiny tidbit is there was not recently, about 3 months ago, 2.5, there was a contingent that went into Belarus to sit across the table with a negotiating team from Russia. Okay, fine. So they did their things, and I hope they did well, and I hope they, got to some issues and settled some issues one at a time and started building some kind of an agreement together. So what happened when they got home is one of the guys who was part of the contingent, and this is on the internet, this is not speculation, he was executed the next day after he was their top guy to go into this room and negotiate on behalf of Ukraine. He was executed. Now, that really sounds like the kind of guy and the kind of government I want to support as a Canadian. And so this Zelensky guy is doing Zoom calls into I think it was last week or the week before, he's doing Zoom calls into all the schools in Canada. Let's see, the guy's got Hitlerian, and that's not the only thing. I mean, there are, again, a lot of mixed nationalities that are both mayors and politicians and everything all throughout Ukraine, and some of them are Russian. They've all been jailed or killed, and his security forces have jailed and killed him. Now, he can sit back and say, well, that wasn't me. Well, great, it was you. And I just like to remind people as a function of old history. And again, my background and my family fought the Nazis. My dad did in the RCAF, and my uncle died in England and is buried in Scotland, England, fighting the Nazis. He died in his Spitfire. And they'd be rolling over in their graves right now, watching Canada support a Nazi, and they only support the Nazis because they're performing a strategic task, which is to try and destabilize Russia. So we like Nazis all of a sudden if they're going to do another favor for us. But I'm going to remind everyone that in 1939, when World War II started, Hitler in New York City and in the United States was a hero. He was loved. He was Time Magazine Man of the Year as the super turnaround genius of Germany. He was loved. In the spring of 39, they had a Nazi rally with swastikas and SS uniforms and the whole bit with the Bund in the New York area. And they concluded at Madison Square Gardens and had a big rah-rah party for Nazism. Ooh, we like to forget that history, wouldn't we? And by the way, that's on YouTube, so go look it up. Go look it up. And so the reason I'm saying this is this whole narrative in North America is not, magic in terms of figuring out who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And what they try to do in every instance, whenever there's any war breakout, is they want to create a guy with a black cowboy hat and a black outfit, and then they want to create a white cowboy hat guy, and it's always the United States that's the white cowboy hatted guy. It's always Western interests that are the guys wearing the white and it's bullshit. It's not an accurate narrative, you are operating with NATO and U.S. forces right on the border of Russia. You have lied your way all for the last 20 years. You've told lie after lie after lie about NATO expansion. And at some point, the pressure valve goes off and they can't take it any longer. And Putin's not the kind of guy to lie down and be steamrolled over top of Talise Flat. He's not that kind of guy, and neither is Russia. So, but the Western powers think they should own the entire world. They think the world should be unipolar. They should be the unipole and run the entire world. So again, the biggest prize is Russia. Oh, they feel, because they're wisest, all-knowing and all-wise, that Russia should be split up into 4 or 5 different countries. Great. The British did that in North Africa. They drew their lines. Everybody draws their lines, and I don't think Russians or Putin sees it that way. And again, why are they an enemy? It's because of success. And if you'd like an analogy to that, and this is the way U.S. and NATO do business, if you remember back in the days when Tonya Harding was up against Nancy Kerrigan, Tonya Harding couldn't beat Nancy Kerrigan. So what she did is hire a guy to go into her change room and whack her across the knee with a crowbar and try and break her legs. And there's a famous picture you can look at of Nancy Kerrigan holding her leg and crying after this guy whacked her and, took her out of the competition. So what the U.S. and NATO thing is, well, if you can't beat the guy because they're just too hardworking, we've got to go in and break their knees. We've got to whack them in the knees. And that's the whole strategy. So you do this regime change and this disruption, that's taking the crowbar and whacking them in the knees so they can't be successful anymore. And again, go forward. They're even more doing it for what Russia's going to be in the future, which is you give them 6-7 more years, they were going to be an energy powerhouse. 3, maybe even 4 big gas lines into China. They were going to put a second line, Nord Stream 2, into Germany. And by the way, that was not Putin's idea. That was Merkel's idea. He did not want to do that. Anyway, the only thing that Russia would do, and Trump came in and said, hey, what are you doing buying all this gas from Russia? We're protecting you from Russia. Well, if you folks remember when the mob got started in New Jersey, they'd knock on your door and say, "Hey, look, we're here to protect you." And you'd say, if you were naive, you'd say, "Well, protect me from, I've been doing business here for 5 years. Protect me from who?" Well, let me see, we've got another division of our same group that'll come in and see you tomorrow. And they take a hammer and hit you on the hand with it. This is where you're actually being protected from us. So you have to pay us protection money. And it's unfortunate, but the government's taken over that role. The government's got, it's the only big group in the world that has the market cornered on violence. Companies can't be violent with you if you don't buy their products, but the government, if you don't do everything they say, they can commit violence against you because they could throw you in jail. So,
No,
I just,
no,
I'm just, I'm just, now we've hit the breaking point where we've got PSAs going on in New York yesterday telling people what to do if they see a flash from a nuclear bomb. I'm going, my God, how did we get here? And all these neocons in the United States are minimizing what the effects would be of nuclear war. It's the end of everything. Even if you don't get fried with the initial blast or the shock wave, even if that doesn't happen, the entire atmosphere of the entire world goes poison, and you will die in the next, 9 months of an agonizing leukemia or something worse. While everybody else has got the same thing, so there's no hospital to go to. So, I've never been more concerned than I am. And by the way, I'm leaving tomorrow night to go back to Russia, and we're just really vacationing. I'm not meeting with any of my KGB operatives or anything like that. We've got a cottage there, and we like to. My wife has her great friends, and her girlfriends, and my wife just loves it there. So unfortunately, it makes it difficult for us to get in and out. You have to go through Istanbul, but I've solved bigger problems like that than that in my life.
yeah.
So anyway,
So,
would you? Go ahead,
can I jump
Stephen.
in? Can I
Yeah,
jump in?
absolutely.
So, yeah, just to be clear to everyone, we're going to get to these comments. I know people have different perspectives. We welcome them, and this is a dialogue. So to create awareness, we're learning from you. Hopefully, you're learning from us. But what Brian's talking about is this unipolar, rules-based world order. And you're correct, Brian. I guess these deep staters in the West feel they should be ruling the world. So they can go into Libya, they can go into Iraq, they can go into
Anywhere.
Iran, they can go into Venezuela, they can go into Afghanistan. Sovereignty doesn't matter because
No.
they're the all powering, the all knowing, and the divine,
Well,
if you will. But
yeah.
now we're dealing with Russia here. And some people have linked Putin to the World Economic Forum and the globalism, and there is some of that here. But what's happening now is undeniable. There's a true rift in this unipolar world order right now, and we can thank Russia for standing up to it. Because from my standpoint in NCA, we support a multipolar world, a fair competition. We think that'll bring the best results for everyone. We don't support totalitarianism, tyranny by one power, holding a big stick and whacking people when they don't follow this line. And this is, I'm sickened by the multi-controlled establishment in Canada, Brian. They are absolute puppet stooges of the deep state in the West, without question. All the propaganda in the US is in Canada, Europe, Australia. Brian, the warmongers, they're pushing this. This has nothing to do with the Ukrainian people or this facade called Ukrainian democracy. It's not a democracy. The US went in there in 2014 and initiated, funded, encouraged a coup, right? That's fact. Go watch Ukraine. What's that movie? Ukraine on Fire. Excellent
Yeah.
documentary that documents it. Ukraine on Fire will bring you up to speed on that. But this is all about unipolar rules-based world governance, world order, and maintaining it. Right now, they're threatened. Russia is winning in the war. They are days, weeks away from liberating the entire Donbass. There's a good chance they will head south and take Odessa as well, Brian.
Well,
But
yeah,
hold on a sec here.
yeah.
But that's what's happening. So the
Yeah.
rhetoric, this dangerous rhetoric from puppet Biden, puppet Trudeau, it could be anyone else. Used to be puppet Boris Johnson. Now they'll put another puppet in there, right? But they're talking, about this is help Ukrainian democracy. This is just doublespeak. It's an illusion. They talk about the free world. That's just propaganda. There's so much censorship in the West. People are getting thrown in jail. People are getting bullied for their uh, freedom of expression, Brian. This free world thing is an illusion. And then they talk, we have to protect Ukraine democracy. Same thing. The rhetoric coming out of puppet Biden is scary. What are they going to do? They know they're losing. They're calling for strategic failure now of Russia. So how far are they going to take it? And this is why people are starting to worry about a nuclear war, which is a definite possibility depending how far they will take it, Brian. It's quite scary now. The rhetoric coming out of the West, now they're talking about putting a cap on Russian oil price. This is absolutely unipolar, rules-based order,
Oh,
Brian. A
that's a
cap.
grade 4 school teacher coming up
So
with stuff like that.
yeah, this is
Yeah.
global tyranny, and this Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary in the U.S., was going on about it, and they're saying if they don't do it, they will threaten more sanctions. But I think what Russia should do is just cut off all the oil, let oil go over $200 a barrel, right? But we'll have to see. But Brian, they are trying to coerce China into this cap. If China is a true ally
Not going
of
to happen.
Russia, it won't do it.
It's not going to happen. In
Yeah.
fact, if you watch the way things are falling out right now, if you can really get up to 60,000 feet and look at all the countries, and I'm talking, there's a group of countries that hold between 80 and 85% of the world's population, when you exclude India and China. They are so relieved that somebody like Putin finally stood up and said, "You're not going any farther. You've lied to me too many times. You've ruined countries." If the unipolar world had gone into countries, fixed them up, they got a nice little democracy happening, and they're sweet places to go on vacation, I'd say, well, keep on going. Maybe the world should be unipolar. But they started by ruining Cuba. They've ruined so many countries. And again, Venezuela, like, they're not countries that don't have oil. They're countries that do have oil. Magically, all of those ones are on their radar. In any other country, you could commit genocide till the cows come home. You're not on our radar because you don't have oil. But anyways, if they went into these countries like Libya and fixed them up and made them beautiful, and the standard of living shot north, I'd say, hey, you guys are doing a great job, including Iraq, including the Balkans. But what they do is they leave the place in a shambles, and including Syria, they leave it a bombed out crap hole, and they don't fix the place up. They do not fix the damage. And so what they're doing is, and Libya is an excellent example because it had a fairly high watermark in terms of standard of living. It was 43rd in the world. Now it's 138th. After the United States got through doing what they do, They're 138. Their standard of living went down to third world status. They were the #1 country for standard of living in all of Africa. And again, so success, and he de-dollarized, started trading in gold. So he became, they put out a contract on him. And so the United States ends up killing him off.
Yeah.
They work with language. So for example,
Mhm.
if people are fighting for freedom in Baghdad and fighting US forces who are invading, well, they're called insurgents. But if they do it somewhere else where they like those guys, they call them freedom fighters. Insurgents,
Yeah.
freedom. This goes to
Yeah.
show you how the linguistics works, so that they can frame these guys in a way that and like I say, I see some of the WEF stuff popping up in the thing. Look, these people, okay, and I'm talking about Klaus Schwab and the WEF, who have this grand master plan for how all the people in the world should be in 10 years or 8 years. Yeah, I've seen guys like this in history before. Hitler was one of them. Stalin was one of them. Their stuff doesn't work that well. It turns out to be a disaster. And if anything, it would be my paradigm to break the world into smaller areas. And you may see the United States break into smaller countries. If things continue to go the way they are, that's a very real possibility. You're going to see states that are more commonsensical pop up, and people will congregate to think alike. And then finally, you're just going to see the Fed get too heavy-handed with them, and they break apart. And of course, Texas and Florida are two that come to mind, but there'll be some others in there as well. So
Yeah, it's important too. Like I've talked to some Ukrainians who are pro Zelensky.
Yeah.
And I find they're caught up in the Soviet Union and what happened then.
Yeah.
That they can't separate the two. And Stalin was one of the most absolute butchers ever. Hundreds of millions of people, the gulags, innocent people getting thrown into those terrible prisons. And but they need to separate. Russia has changed. It's a true nationalist state, very independent, very, very strong, and that's the reality of it. There are ties between Putin and the World Economic Forum in the past. We're not denying that.
Yep.
But what we look at here, Brian, NCA, what we look at is what's happening now, and there's a clear undeniable break between the unipolar rules based and what Russia's doing. No one can dispute that.
Yeah.
So are they interconnected? Yes, they are. But what's emerging now? People need to wake up to this. It's called the multipolar world. We're seeing it through BRICS. We're seeing it through gas for ruble. We're seeing it gold for ruble for gas. There could be ruble for grains. Russian grains is coming up. Russia set up an alternative to the SWIFT banking interaction system, right? So this is all breaking away. They're talking about a BRICS currency now. Russia's talked about a currency backed by a basket of commodities, which we think is a brilliant idea. So all this stuff, as Brian said, would get you killed, because this is a direct existential attack on this rules-based order. And right now, it's the truth of Canada is coming out, Brian. The facade of these crooked, multi-controlled politicians in the deep state in Canada, about peace and all the democracy, all the surface propaganda. The reality is they're no different than the deep state in the U.S. They don't respect the sovereignty of Russia or any other country emerging. They don't. They want to control. Brian, they're
Well,
acting like
you know,
tyrants.
it's really unfortunate, and sort of to pull us back toward Canada right now. I mean, it is, psychological fad, and these are mass mass events. They're mass psychosis events that everyone jumps on the bandwagon. As I was saying before, this was a 30 country organized or 20 country organized gang rape of Europe, where we all jumped on the SWIFT. We're not buying any more. We're not going to send them any more products. We're not going to buy their products. Oh, except for oil and gas. This was a very carefully, and it was designed to bring Russia down to its knees very, very quickly, and how destabilize it to such an extent that they kick Putin out, and literally just bring it to its knees in 10 days. Never happened. The Russians are chess players, and they can outplay these porch checkers players in 10 minutes. And as soon as I saw this, long before Putin, I said, he's just going to take rubles for energy. And secondly, these guys have no choice. They have to take the energy, or they can shut down BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen could shut down tomorrow morning and not produce a car and lay off a couple of 100,000 people, if not more. Actually, with all the ancillaries, 300,000 people, and take a hit to your GDP that the likes of which no depression would even feed you. So, it was really confusing to me that, these countries that are so dependent on energy decided, oh, we're going to, take all this asymmetric action against Russia. I mean, it just never made sense at the beginning, because Russia holds all the cards. Russia's holding 3 aces and 2 kings, and you're sitting there with 2 twos, a jack, queen, and a 5. And so you're going to go and take on that hand. They weren't holding any cards. They were in a totally disadvantaged situation. And all they had to do was start. And now you're going to see, and which will accelerate, hopefully, diplomacy. You're going to see Germany run out of energy. And when it comes to natural gas, you can't build LNG in a few months. You can't do it. And so you can resource some of your gas, but you can't do it to that extent. And so Europe is going to be an economic backwater if they don't settle this thing out and start to do things that take into account the people and jobs and the economy and gasoline prices, benzene, and also natural gas prices. These are creating hardships on everybody over there. And, Canadians who get a really, really good price on their natural gas, you just can't believe what's going on over there and how expensive it's going to be to both heat and air condition your home. And heat, it gets cold in southern Germany. Been there a lot of times. And it gets so cold in Europe. And, so what's going to happen is they're not going to let people not heat. So what they're going to do is shut down industry. They're going to basically shut down most of their GDP in order to let people heat their homes. That's a crazy situation to be in when they had the most secure gas supply of any country in the world. Russian gas in the form of 2 pipelines. They were secure. And Russia was not playing geopolitical games with them at all. It was a 100% commercial relationship. And so, again, this is an organized event. This war is staged. The whole thing was organized from 2014 forward, when they took over Ukraine and made it a client state. And they want to take over Russia and make it a client state too. But it's not going to happen. These guys are too smart, too tough, and they're too well armed. And, Russia is not a gas station disguised as a country. It is, if it was, then the economic disruption to Europe wouldn't be a tenth of what it is right now. And I really feel sorry for people in Europe, and especially for people in Germany, because they're going to have to make capital allocations with their personal budgets like you've never seen. You think it's bad, $100 a tank here in Calgary? You know, they're going to be looking at $200 a tank over there. And if you make what the average person makes in Germany, that's a lot of money. And you're looking at a double hit, because our heating bills will not go up that much. They'll go up, but not that much. Their heating bills and natural gas prices are insane over there. They were insane 2 years ago before the war, but now they're doubly insane. And this is insanity. I might add that just today, for the first time, the euro slipped below the price of the US dollar.
Yeah.
The euro, which is a reflection of the European economy, is going to get hammered, and it's been getting hammered. And you know, guess who wins? United States wins. You deindustrialize Germany and shut them down and do this Klaus Schwab thing where everyone's growing sunflower seeds, and also you know, got a some kind of a bug farm so that people can eat protein-based bug stuff. You know, they're just doing it. And you know, with all this woke and WEF stuff, Putin, there was back in the day, Putin's gone through several transformations in his tenure as leader of Russia. Several transformations. I think he was a standard KGB guy, even though he wasn't an operations guy. He was a lawyer for the KGB. I think he was too much of a KGB-ish type guy at the beginning, high security. There was a time when he wanted to become part of the West, but he wanted to become part of the West on equal partnership terms. In the early part of, let's say, 2000, 1998, he wanted to form alliances with the United States because they were both fighting terrorism. And basically, he was told to go home, sit at the back of the bus. We're in charge of the United States, and we'll soon be in charge of you. So, you know, Putin is not one to sit there, well, I don't think that's going to happen. And, you know, anyway, he's a different person today in the last 4 or 5 or 6 years than he was at the beginning of his career. And he also dislodged all the major oligarchs and flattened out the oligarchical system. And you know, you could, as like, if you had the brains of a Joe Biden, you could say, well, you know, it's only a few oligarchs that have all the money. Well, I've been to Moscow and I've never seen so many Mercedes-Benzes in my entire life. The concentration of Mercedes-Benzes and high-end BMWs is like I've never seen anywhere. So there's a couple of 100, 300, 400,000 of these cars. Like 5 oligarchs can't own 400,000 BMWs. So there's a lot of people doing really well. And what tends to happen is the entrepreneurs lead the economy north, so that the other parts, you know, you know, they sort of come along for the ride. But you know, it's they still don't make wages like they do in the West. But on the other hand, they don't have costs like they do in the West. You know, we've got, I know what it is for all in an apartment over there, 1,000 square foot apartment. And this is heat, hydro, taxes, blah, 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 everything, including internet, high-speed internet, the whole thing. It's $150 a month for everything. And that would be $750 here in Calgary. So the government in Russia hasn't learned to reach into your pocket at every transaction. Like they do here in Canada. You can't do anything without getting taxed, except for breathe, and they'll get that next. Yeah, they tax your water, they tax everything. Yeah. And, you know, look, I'm not here to say that Russia is perfect, because it's far from it. It's got some things that just bother the crap out of me, including the bureaucratic state, you know, and, but I got a lot of friends over there, and, I'll be probably barbecuing at my cottage on Sunday night with a bunch of new Russian friends that I made going down to Istanbul. And, we, we're not at loggerheads in any way, shape, or form. We believe in the individual. We believe in peace. We believe in freedom. And nobody wants to be a subject of a unipolar structure. And again, getting back to the world right now, it's dividing as we speak. And you're seeing countries like, the BRICS pop up, and there'll be more. And they're tired of it too. And they're applauding Putin like you've never seen before. They're so relieved that this crazy unipolar society of country breakers goes in and bombs people to the Stone Age, killed 1 million in Iraq for no reason. And 80% of them were women and children and babies. As Madeleine Albright said when she was interviewed on 60 Minutes, after 500,000 children died of starvation and lack of medical stuff because of the sanctions on Iraq, she said, well, do you think it was worth it? And she says, yeah, it was worth it. It was worth the 500,000 dead. It goes to show you how disposable life is to certain societies. This is their own people aren't disposable, at least all of them aren't, but people in other countries with different colored skin, they're just disposable people in the greater scheme of grabbing power. It's not a good thing. And again, in the unipolar side, if I went through their last 5 countries and I again said, wow, what a great job you've done, then I might even lean towards a unipolar world, but I can't do that. I give them F's and D's and F's on the last 5 or 6 operations they've done. And, I can't think that way any longer. I've been to too many countries. I've educated myself by going to these countries, and I've gotten to know all the people in all these different countries. And from Kiev to Donbass, all the way down to Yalta, Sevastopol, all the way up to Moscow, from St. Petersburg. I haven't been in the super east parts of Russia, nor do I really want to. But, I've been to the countryside and I've been to the big cities. And, they've got a real Russian culture that's unique to them. And, they're just trying to do the best they can with what they've got.
Yeah.
And so I'm just really afraid right now with this talk of duck, cover, and roll when the bomb goes off in New York. How did we get here? Like, how in God's name did we get here? Well, we got here by a bunch of neocons in Washington massaging the situation, going for war, and pushing, because what happens in a late stage default of a unipolar war is they're clinging by their fingernails. And they're starting to get more and more desperate as time goes by. And in a fit of desperation, I'm afraid that something stupid will happen. That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah, exactly. Look at the desperation in Europe with the economy. Look at that desperation on the battlefield.
Well, look, look at Sri Lanka, where really early in this whole thing, it was a politician's nightmare. They went around to all the politicians and burned their houses down. That's wow. I've never seen that before. But when the pitchforks and the torches come out, like those old Lon Chaney movies where they went to get the monster and kill the monster, Frankenstein, that's every politician's worst nightmare. And so, this is going to happen in certain ways all through Europe, because what started it in Sri Lanka was the stupid government getting together and saying, we're going to use way less fertilizer. And farming is the big thing there. And of course, that produces the food. So then they get a 30 to 40% drop off in food production. They were running tight anyway.
Yeah.
And they unfortunately don't have any oil or natural gas or anything that they can make money with on the world market. So they're in they're in trouble. And
Yeah.
they're the first to get into really, really big trouble where they're literally out of food. So they might get a bailout from a bunch of countries. But wait till 4 and 5 pop up, like Bangladesh and a few of these areas, to get into exactly the same problem where, these countries, the normal people are spending 50 to 70% of their monthly budget on food.
Yeah.
If food doubles, they're priced out of the market. And, so, I don't want to see this, and it's where people are literally dying on the streets and starving, just like in the last 100 years, it's happened again. It's happened before, and in the '90s and forward, we started to help Africa diversify their food production so that it was self-sufficient. And when we did, it became the fastest growing continent in terms of GDP growth anywhere. They were growing at 7% a year. So I just believe in the right to people to do well for themselves without being oppressed by a superpower.
Yeah.
And,
Exactly.
but getting back to Canada here, I can't get optimistic. I really can't. And again, we've got two parties that have decided to throw in together. And, I hate to be sound like an a-hole, but when a democracy is over, when the quality of the person casting those votes has gone so low and is so ignorant in the areas of economics, sustainability, politics and policy, and how policy propagates, when they just know nothing about those things, and they make
Yeah.
all their political decision on an emotional first reaction. And that's when guys like Justin Trudeau, with his pretty language, he does not follow up on a single thing, but with his pretty language and all that, woos all the people, and they just think he's so dreamy. And then he forms an alliance with another party, and that's going to be tough to break that alliance. And
But it doesn't matter. It's multi-controlled opposition, Brian.
yeah, and
It
it,
doesn't
well,
matter.
and again, you're right. So
It
we're in
just
a
goes back and forth. But this is the
yeah,
system they
it's a
created.
uniparty. It's a
But this
uniparty
is
to a large extent.
no. But this is the system the establishment has created. The
Yep.
democracy is a facade. It's no different in the U.S., in Australia, in the UK, and likely in Germany, France, whatever. It's a facade, Brian.
Yep.
So they want an uninformed, emotional-based electorate, citizenry. All the propaganda about Ukraine, it's been nearly 99% emotional based.
Well,
Brian?
propaganda is designed to give emotional triggers. So I'll give you an example in Ukraine. Early in the Ukraine, they had this Bucha thing with the bodies, and they get the cameras around. That turned out to be a hoax. But one of the bigger ones, and they've done this, they did this with Putin. They circulated, this is the deep state manufacturing these things, along with the CIA. They go, well, Putin is paying a bounty in Syria to kill Americans. Well, it's a total lie. It's a 100% lie. So they make this thing up, and so they announce this on CNN and CNBC. Now, you know what happens when they find out it's a lie and it becomes debunked in totality? They say nothing. So the damage is done because that's made an imprint on your brain. It's given you an emotional reaction, and that doesn't go away. And so, that stays inside your brain and affects your thinking, even though it's a lie. And again, the other one was, Zelensky's chief communicator was saying, "Oh, the Russians are raping women, and we've got multiple cases of gang rapes and all that." It was a lie. Finally, the Western press says, "Look, we need to talk to some of these women." She couldn't produce anyone because it was like just manufactured lie.
Yeah.
But it sounded great, and it gets a stunning emotional reaction because, war and rape, that's an iconic emotional trigger. to think that these people are evil, and it reinforces that dark red evil color in you. And then when
Yeah.
it's found out it's a total lie and she's been fired for just making this up, and she's even been in the press saying, yeah, I made it all up. But that stuff that gets reported in CNN, that's not reversed out. That's how they just report it about the rape, alleged rapes, and then when it's found out it was a lie, they say nothing and they move on to the next thing. The
Yeah.
damage in people's brains is already done, and you're being emotionally managed at all times to
They
think that,
also, yeah, exactly. They also do that to Westerners who are
yeah,
opposing. They've attacked me, they vilified me. They never gave me a chance to hear my side of it. There's endless examples of that, Brian.
yeah, yeah.
What they're doing to Russia now.
Somebody put in a
Blinken,
lip
hold on a
in
sec.
the
Blinken,
comments here. Yeah.
Blinken and Biden and the deep state, the rhetoric is they're saying Russia can't win because then might is right then. But that is Orwellian doublespeak. But if you're uninformed, you're going to take that in and say, oh, yeah, they can't win because of that. The reason it's doublespeak is the unipolar rules based world order is based fundamentally on might is right. And there's endless examples of that. Iraq, Libya, Venezuela, Afghanistan. There was just there was a diplomat in the media today admitting that U.S. was involved in instigating all these coups.
Yep. All of them.
Right.
Yep.
So it's all a facade. This is might is right. They don't want to operate on a fair market system and compete with Russia economically in that. They want to dominate the world. This is totalitarianism. You can link it even to Hitler and what his agenda was to control the world. It's no different, Brian.
Well,
But
when they say, yeah,
this is my fear with this
yeah. Well, when they
because
say they want to bring
Russia
democracy
is
to you,
doing
they don't.
very well. Russia's doing very well.
Yep.
They're winning their special operation. You can see these puppet Western politicians are getting desperate, as you pointed out. How far are they willing to take it? And then we got a mass of people in the West. Oh, there's some really informed Westerners, but there's a percentage of them that are misinformed, uninformed, divided, controlled, without question, Brian.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's scary because they're going to get behind these multi-control politicians, and it could lead to a disaster. It already is economically. Look at Europe; it's insane.
Yeah. It's breaking down. It's
Yeah.
breaking down
So
at
how
a rate
far
of
are they
speed
going
you
to
can't
go?
even believe. It is breaking down.
Yeah.
And the problem is, again, so now you get civil society with their rakes out and their pitchforks and their tiki torches, and they're serious. And they know, they're not stupid. They know their politicians and bad policies got them into this mess. And, so what happens is you just get a breakdown. And also what's happening even if these guys block, for example, if truckers and farmers get together, they can block the entire logistical delivery of food. Then what happens is your worst nightmare. And if you remember back here in Canada to the beginning of COVID, you couldn't get toilet paper. Take that and multiply it out to every single product in the store. You can't get any of the stuff. The stores are empty. Because what happens is, as soon as people even see the store half empty, they phone up all their friends and say, you got to get down here and load up. And they start hoarding. And that is, again, a mass formation event of very bad psychology. And that's psychology that will, end a society. And then what happens is they start to get desperate, and the politicians start to get desperate. And these people are not the smartest guys on the street. They're emotionally driven. Then somebody does something stupid. And that leads to a debacle that ends up with nuclear fallout. And you know, I mean, I grew up in Toronto, and I grew up with air raid sirens being at my school. And so, if the Russian bombers were coming overhead, if they got wind that the Russian bombers were an hour out, the air raid sirens would go off, and you had a chance to get home, get into your basement. And I grew up like that, and I was always afraid as a little kid, you know, and I was afraid of nuclear war, and it was because of the you know, more or less the physical devices like sirens, and you know, just a general fear of Russia and the Soviet Union. So I grew up in that, and then it went away. Now it's back, and it's back worse than it's ever been, because I realized how inept some of these people are that have got their hands on the trigger. And we you know, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, we came that close to starting a nuclear war. One of the sub commanders, you know, one of the boats on top of the Russian sub was dropping depth charges and other explosive devices to scare the crap out of the Russians. So this Russian commander said, "Bring out the special load, the specially tipped, uh, uh, you know, device. We'll put it in the torpedo tube," and it was a nuclear uh, tipped torpedo. And he was going to fire it. He thought his life was over. And based on all the banging, clanging outside of him, he went into a fit of desperation. And if it hadn't have been for one KGB officer that had an overriding, uh, uh, he could override the decision, that would have been launched. That would have gone up top and taken out 4 or 5 boats with the shock wave that goes through the water. The bottoms of the boats would have disappeared. And then there'd be a full-scale launch, and the end of the world would have been then. And so it's gotten close. And the closer together you put these missiles, like you know, the United States wants to put missiles pointing at Russia 250 miles south of Moscow. They want them all over the place. The closer you stack together these things, the more dangerous there is that somebody has a misunderstanding and an accident occurs. But when the accident occurs, it won't be perceived as an accident. It'll be perceived as an attack. And let's launch them all. And both the United States and Russia have got multiple platforms underwater that come up to the top, and they launch them all. They've also got land-based, and they launch all of them. And now we're talking about putting missiles into Finland and Sweden. It's just going
Belarus,
insane right now.
Belarus.
It's amping up worse than it ever did
it's
when
terrible.
I was a kid. It's amping up, and no one, not a single politician, is trying to amp down the situation other than Russia. They're amping it up.
Yeah. Well, China's
And
been good. China's
yes, they have.
pushing
They don't want the end of the
diplomacy.
world.
India's
Yep.
been neutral.
Yep.
Praise to Mexico.
Well,
Mexico's been neutral.
yeah.
Canada is heading down the wrong path. We all
Yep.
know it.
Yep.
Financially, economically, it's a disaster in Canada.
Yep.
It's been going on for decades. Socially, it's becoming more problematic. We're harming our environment, and now look at we've become a warmongering nation.
Why?
We're not a neutral nation.
It's got no upside and nothing but downside.
Look at Julian Assange, what he's about to go through if he's extradited.
This is world
And
control.
did the multi-control deep state in Canada, do they care about Julian Assange?
In Lester B. Pearson's day, they would have.
No, but they all, they try and sugarcoat all these human rights,
Sure.
and for the woke class, right? But get this, it was Mexico who's actually stood up, and I praise to them because they've offered asylum for Julian Assange. And I know the U.S. won't do it, but praise on them to at least put that out there. But people should be very concerned. We just went through 2 years of this draconian lockdown. Then they pivoted to this proxy war in Ukraine, which is basically staged, engineered. How far do they want to take it? Brian, only time will tell. Russia's winning on so many fronts now. It's driving them crazy. Like How far are they going to take it and put everyone at risk? This is serious. Why are these people in power in the West? This whole system in the West,
It's
I would
because of the
argue,
voters. The
no, it's
voters
not
are
the voters.
oh yeah.
Yeah, the voters are to blame, but it's a controlled system.
Find a third party. Find
Yeah,
anything.
but we are a third party, and we know how difficult it is
It's
because
impossible. They're too afraid to be
because
disruptive.
we're fighting the media, we're fighting these crooked parties. We can't compete with them on
No.
any level, right? Except on social media, they cannot beat our voice, Brian.
No.
That's the one thing we have over them. We talk about issues that they wouldn't even dream of talking about, like today.
Yeah.
Okay, but this is in the U.S. This is in the U.K. This is throughout Europe. It's in Australia, New Zealand, you name it. Okay? But
Yeah.
this is a
Yeah.
reality of it's just out of control. We need like something's got to happen. Like it's so systemically corrupt, Brian.
Yep.
And it's all based on doublespeak, democracy, freedom and all this nonsense. It's just not reality. Now they're putting everyone at risk. Look at the
Well,
economic ramifications
yeah.
of these stupid sanctions. My question to you, was it a complete miscalculation or was it planned?
No, it was a miscalculation. They thought they could take Russia down in
Are
30
you
days.
sure?
Oh, well, they thought they could destabilize Russia and get Putin out and have the citizens go up against Putin. Never happened.
So that
And
you're
and
sure? Because some people
uh,
argue that this is planned and it's going to bring on the financial reset.
well,
I'm kind of leaning towards what you're saying
yeah,
because,
yeah. I,
but
I
look at inflation.
oh
Federal Reserve Powell, he was telling everyone over a year ago, it's transitory. Don't worry,
yeah.
inflation is transitory. Was that planned or was that a miscalculation?
No. They've been warned for years. But you know what
No,
happens
no,
through
no, no.
inflation?
But
Government
he,
debt shrinks.
no,
Government
but
debt. They get out of their debt
I
for
know. But
free.
is he? So was that planned? The inflation?
Oh, absolutely, it is. It's
Yeah.
part
So he
part of the
was
economy.
lying.
Yeah.
He was
Oh, of
lying
course
to
he was.
people.
Of course it was.
So how
If
are
you,
they going to deal with inflation now? How far will they go, Brian?
oh, I mean, first of all,
Will they crash the economy and put us all
yes,
in a deep recession?
they're going to crash the economy.
Why?
Well, first of all, they've got to try and like the biggest balloon of desperation hanging over the American economy is the massive amount of debt. And there's not only just the declared debt of 30 odd trillion, but there's also the unfunded debt liabilities. So, for example, Stephen, if I owe you $100 a month for life, and I can deflate that debt by inflating the economy. Right now, $100 a month is at minimum wage, X hours. But if I can deflate the economy and bring things up, that turns into $100 is now 1 hour's work. Because when I was a kid, minimum wage was 50 cents an hour. Now it's 16. It used to be 50 cents an hour. So if I can make my debts go away, and no one's a bigger debtor than the United States of America, I can make my debts go away by inflating through inflation. They're going away at quite a rapid pace. And so they come back on side. They're made whole by making that debt worthless. And
Yeah, but right now they're raising interest rates and they're
yeah,
claiming they're going to bring it down.
yeah. So they are raising interest rates, but they can only go so far, because if you do a calculation of debt and debt servicing in the United States, I think they bring in around $6 trillion of tax revenue per year. Now, if let's say rates go high enough where their interest payments are $6 trillion a year, then where's the money for everything else they spend money on,
Yeah,
including the
exactly.
military? It goes away.
Exactly.
So there's a ceiling, or
Yeah.
there's a ceiling, a theoretical ceiling that you hit, where you can only take rates so far this time. and everybody talks about Paul Volcker in 1980, and I was an analyst on Bay Street in Toronto that year. And everyone talked about Volcker, but the United States had a debt to GDP ratio of maybe 25 to 30% at the time. Now it's 130, 140. It's many, many times that as a function of GDP. They do not have the flexibility that they had back then.
Yeah.
So if you think rates are going to 15% or 10%, not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a self-bankrupting transaction.
So inflation's going to stay high then.
Yep.
Is that what you anticipate?
They can only fight it so much.
Yeah,
and then they have
and that's what I
to back
figure.
off. Yeah.
So
they can only
there's
back off.
rhetoric, but they've already said that.
They can talk however they
because
want.
a lot of people ask us because they're concerned.
Yes.
So we figure they were saying they may go as high as 4%.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, actually it was 3 to 4%.
Could be 4,
right?
could be 5. You could top out at 5, but it's not going to 10.
But
it ain't going to 10.
In the 1980s, they went to
they don't have the
20%.
flexibility. They don't have the flexibility.
Yeah, there's so much debt.
Debt to GDP was way lower. They've run themselves into basically bankruptcy.
So I just want to talk about this now. Russia's on the verge of liberating Donbass, the people there. Thank God, because I can't believe the stuff they come through. But this tension, this conflict is not going away, right? They will keep arming whatever's left of Ukraine, right?
Yep.
So
it's confused. Look, the one thing that's going to break we were just talking about interest rates can only go so far. This war can only go so far, because when people are freezing to death, and I'm talking older people who are on fixed incomes, are freezing to death in their homes in Germany, freezing to death this fall. I can't see the war going past the fall. They've got to release the gas and get it going again. And so that's I'm going to call that a limiting effect, unless they start selling wood burning stoves and telling people to chop down all the trees in all the parks. There's a hard stop here. Secondly, there's a bit of a strategy going on here with Russia, because they shut down the famous compressor stories out of Siemens in Montreal.
Yeah.
But okay, so you get the things back. But what they've done is they've depleted Germany's ability to store gas. So whatever was going in at the reduced rate on Pipeline 1 was being used. And normally the extra 40% would be going into storage. So a bit of a chess game going on there. And I call it smart chess. You would reduce Germany this winter to 1946 Berlin. And that was a very tough time. And I just don't want to see it. I love Germany and I love Germans, and been there lots of times. And I have nothing bad to say about Germany and Germans. Always had a great time. And I love the country. It's just a beautiful, beautiful country. And I love German society and the order and preciseness that they bring to the ongoing vibe of logistics inside there. So I really like the place. And for these nutty guys, and you could call it WEF think or whatever, to sit there and destroy Germany like they're on the verge of doing, first of all, you're going to see civil disorder like you're seeing right now in Holland.
Or Sri Lanka.
Well, that's that's insane. Like that's you can't get lower than that. They're on the verge of things, like I say, that kind of breakdown, stage 5 is cannibalism. I mean, it can get pretty bad, and so you don't want to see that because they're our fellow citizens of the world, and we can help them. Secondly, there won't be a grain shortage. Everyone's talking about food shortage. I think we'll be okay for food. I don't think there'll be a shortage. What will cause shortages is the weak countries will not have the ability to bid up the price required, because the way they auction off food, The guy with the biggest check gets the food. And aid is how you bypass that situation and just ship people food as a part of an aid package. Russia will be doing that. Ukraine, will probably be doing some of that as well. And, I think it'll be okay. But, this whole thing, when you upset the logistic of the world in terms of energy and food in Europe, this has an effect. It shrinks everything. And so it's going to be a hard winter in Europe. It's going to be a very, very difficult winter. And it may get even harder because the people are worried right now. And when they're worried, they don't spend their money. And when they don't spend their money, you get GDP contraction like crazy.
Yeah.
And so, like, we're not talking recession here. We're talking way worse than a recession. I mean, way worse. Way worse.
Yeah.
And
it's only just starting.
It's just starting.
Yeah. And it's just going to snowball from here.
Well, and again,
that's tying into my fear. Like, how far are they going to take this?
Yeah.
Do they want like a regional, even potentially a world war? It's crazy, but people should be very concerned and should be watching closely and discerning what is fact and what isn't.
Right.
Brian,
Sure.
What I'd like to know, Brian, just as we close up here, one thing I don't like about Canada, especially from the multi-controlled establishment, is this Russian phobia. It's been going on for a long time, and this anti-Russian rhetoric. Is it simply an extension of the deep state in the U.S.?
I don't think anything's happening against the
no,
Russian
but the rhetoric in the media.
Oh, the rhetoric is crazy.
No, I'm talking. No, but even before the special operation, before that, there was a lot of rhetoric and coming out of the the multi-controlled government in Ottawa, right? Coming out of that, the puppet government, right? Coming out of that, it's always anti-Russian, anti-Russian.
That's racism. That's just flat out racism.
Like, is it because they view Russia as a threat economically? Is it?
Russia was never a threat to anyone economically. They don't have the size.
Yeah,
they don't have the size. What they do have
must be an extension of the U.S. then.
Yes, it is. They don't have the size to their GDP, but let me leave your folks with just a quick, easy economic example of GDP. I'm covered for free health here in Canada. I'm also covered in Russia. I get free health in Russia. And, I guess if I was citizen of the United States and keeping up my $700 a month payments, I would get, I guess what might be free health. But I'll give you an example of GDP. So if I am a US citizen and I get appendicitis and I have to go to the hospital to get my appendix out, that will be $54,000 US in services and things provided to me. That's going to cost me, my insurance company, $54,000. So that $54,000 goes and adds to the GDP. Okay, that's a delivered service. If I get that same appendix deal in Russia, and I have to get my appendix out in Russia, and they're not, I know lots of Russian doctors, they're not third worldy guys. They go to Germany on training sessions. So do the dentists, by the way, and all their gear is from Germany. Anyway, if I get it, I'm going to say that the total all-in cost that the state will provide the medical facility for my appendix being out would probably be in the order of 400 US. So 56,000 US in the United States and 400 US to get the same thing done. So you're looking at why does Russia have a small GDP? Because you have to put price parity against it. And you have to recalculate it on a price parity basis. And so Russia has a much larger economy than you would ever imagine in your wildest dreams. Mm-hmm. Secondly, when you supply the blood, You know, if I was a body and I'm the guy that supplies the food, well, I can get along for a month without food, 3 weeks. If I'm the guy that supplies the water, uh, it's hard to last 3 or 4 days without water. If I'm the guy that supplies your blood and keeps your blood pumping through your body, you can't last 10 minutes without that. Russia just happens to supply the things, the basic materials like food and energy, and especially energy, that are the building blocks for the rest of the economy. And if you subtract away those building blocks, those economies are in big trouble. And so it's the importance of energy to an economy can't be understated and can't be looked at as a simple GDP figure because it empowers 50 other businesses to create, and there's a multiplier effect against the energy to create more and more GDP. And if you subtract away that one thing, then the multiplier effect doesn't kick in, and the amount of GDP killed is beyond unbelievable. So that's why you're going to see, unless this war gets over, you at least start to semi-normalize energy flows. You're going to see a debacle economically in Germany, and whatever happens, Germany flows out to France. And we've all seen the the yellow vesters get going in in France. They're not afraid to protest there. I am very, very proud to say that a lot of countries have looked at our Canadian truckers as an example of democracy in action, street level democracy, a street level protest in action. And a lot of countries are referring to Canada as, hey, we got this idea from Canada. These guys had an effect.
Yeah, great.
Now, I'm very proud. I'm not, of the past 10 years, I'm not that proud of a Canadian, but I was very, very proud to see these guys, all these truckers, even though it was an inconvenience for some people. I had a friend of mine in Ottawa bitching on Facebook that it was inconvenient for him. Well, freedom is not free. Freedom comes at a cost. And Justin Trudeau is subtracting freedoms monthly. He's subtracting them. The freedom of speech, man, oh man, he's attacking freedom of speech and wanting to CRTC regulate what we're doing right here. Holy smokes, man!
Yeah,
That's radical stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah.
by the
Just
way,
remember, but remember, Trudeau is a puppet.
oh sure he is.
There is a
Yep,
deep state of
yep,
these so-called conservatives and liberals and
yep,
corporations, right? You know,
yep,
there's a revolving door between these establishment politicians and the corporate boardrooms, whatever.
yep.
Brian, never lose sight of that, everyone. Otherwise, you're getting controlled in these dichotomies. But I want to make a point here about freedom. And unfortunately, people don't talk about this. The most important freedom, in my opinion, barring life's necessity, the freedom to breathe and eat, that type of thing, Brian, is the freedom of your mind. You got freedom starts with your mind, protecting your mind. A lot of people live because of the divisions, the divide and conquer in our society, left, right, liberal, conservative, vaccinated, non vaccinated, on and on. All this, it's imprisoning people literally in their mind. They don't need real prisons. They're imprisoned in their minds. And what we're doing at NCA, we don't identify anywhere along the spectrum, Brian. We're open minded. We want to expand our minds.
Yeah.
But the most, like my point is, protect your mind. You want a free mind, free thoughts. Without
Yeah.
that, you have nothing. Without that, you have nothing. So
Well,
protect, and that discerning information, questioning your assumptions, questioning your beliefs, questioning the dichotomies. Like someone says, "Oh, I'm conservative. Oh, I'm liberal." I would argue that that person is already controlled by limiting who they are. and their potential, Brian.
Well,
So keep that in
I don't
mind.
identify with any of them.
But
I honestly
I'm
don't.
saying that to everyone. A lot of
And
people get that, but that's what it starts
yeah,
there. You got to
yeah.
free your mind because been in prison. It's been intoxicated by all this false information.
Well, you know, again, be on the guard when somebody says something that's designed to trigger you emotionally. I'll give you an example in Canada with Trudeau. So Trudeau comes on and he says, "Look, if you're not vaccinating, you're putting all our children in danger. All our children and all the people are in danger because of you." That's an emotional trigger. That's to make you one of them, which is, again, a tactic used in Nazi Germany. It's been used everywhere to take a specific segment and make them outliers.
Yeah.
You're going to kill our children. If you don't get vaccinated, you may kill our children. Can you imagine that? I mean,
Yeah.
can you imagine what a powerful
Yeah.
emotional trigger? And people are going to listen to it. I got to look at, oh my God, there that idiot goes again with one of his cheap emotional trigger strategies.
Well, it's
And
just
he
like
goes ahead
this.
and does it.
It's just like Biden. You know,
Same,
Russia has to be strategically
same.
defeated
Yeah, same.
because might is right, and it's going to take your freedom away. It's going to take the freedom of the free world away.
Complete lie.
It's gonna take the democracy.
Yep.
Oh, right? And they're
Yep.
gonna get it, and
Well,
people don't analyze it and
no,
realize it's double speak.
it's just bullshit. It's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
lies being
yeah.
fed to you
It's tough,
to get
man.
an emotional reaction out of you and think, really? Oh my God, Russia's coming for us. Oh,
Yeah,
it's awful. And like I say, I'm not there. A lot of people are wise to these tactics, but a lot of people aren't. And
yeah,
and it has nothing to do with intelligence versus unintelligence. This is all how you're wired emotionally
yeah,
dictates your susceptibility to these things and the permanent damage, it's emotional damage that's inflicted inside your brain. And it doesn't go away. There's,
yeah,
you know, there's an
yeah,
old saying, in the sales business, if you sell stuff, people will often forget what you said, but they'll never ever forget how you made them feel.
yeah.
That is the basis of propaganda. Okay.
And yeah, and the propaganda regarding Ukraine has been all emotional based.
Yeah.
It never talks
All
about
business.
Donbass, the history, and
No,
nothing.
no.
It's just
No,
all
they
emotional. It's
it's
all good and
lies.
evil, good and
Yep,
evil. You
yep,
know, like
yep, yep. Good and evil.
so. It's tough out there, everyone. It's tough, but we got to be stronger and smarter and see through all this. And um, it's getting quite serious. But I want to thank you, Brian.
Sure.
Uh, but this has been great. We'll have to have you on again, and we can rehash and see where we're maybe in 6 months to see where we're at. But
I hope
hopefully,
this.
people find
Yeah,
this rewarding. And thank you for all the comments.
yeah, great. I just hope this. I hope this whole situation uh, sort of implodes into itself, and I'm really hoping that the citizens of Europe, who I love and trust, and I trust their judgment over these guys that are trying to run the show right now. I hope the citizens of Europe get together and have an effect, and they already are, because Boris is gone. The guy in Estonia is faltering. Macron's faltering. You want regime change in Russia? Regime change is going to happen everywhere else but Russia
Yeah, but just
because of this
remember,
stupid
but
strategy.
Boris is gone. They're just putting another
Another
puppet
guy.
in.
Yeah, it's be the same.
Just remember that the multi-controlled system is still intact.
Oh no. Yeah. No,
As long as that's
more of
in
the
there,
same.
they just put another puppet in, like Liz Truss or
Oh
someone
my
like that,
God. She's a
right?
disaster.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but she's the front runner, and she's
Oh
just a
yeah.
warmonger, deep state warmonger,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yes, absolutely she is.
we got to fight through the systemic control. All right, so we're gonna
Yeah.
end it there. Thank you, Brian, and we want to
Great,
wish you the
Stephen.
best on your trip.
Well,
Thank
by,
you for sharing.
by Sunday night, I'll be in Kazan, Russia.
Good for you. Good for you. Praise on you.
Yep. Thanks, Stephen.